Hey you guys, this is Derek J407 here to give you my thoughts on the latest AEW All Elite Wrestling pay-per-view, that being All Out, live from the Sears Center in Chicago, Illinois. The pay-per-view just ended a little while ago, just a couple minutes shy of midnight, so just barely, well, not just barely, they had a couple minutes to spare. Plenty of time for a surprise, but no such thing occurred. They instead went ahead and just went off the air with the ending that they had, and that was Chris Jericho walking out of All Out as the first ever AEW World Heavyweight Champion. 20 years to the month, in fact, in Chicago. He made his debut in WWE, still to this day viewed by many people as one of the best debuts in all of wrestling. So that was a big accomplishment for Jericho in August in Chicago. And now here we are 20 years later from that, back in Chicago in the month of August. And Chris Jericho is the first ever world champion of a brand new wrestling organization. And what was a pretty good match with a Hangman Page at the end of the show on what was an overall pretty good show from top to bottom. Not perfect by any means. A few miscues, even some questionable finishes on this show, and some of the matches kind of getting to a point of insanity and wondering if it's on the good side of insanity or the bad side. But overall, I came away with the show happy and satisfied and got my money's worth. I did order the show on pay-per-view, relaxed in my place, watched the whole thing, all 5 or so hours of it. These shows are pretty long, and they don't all necessarily have to be. But yeah, this was a pretty long show. But yeah, I did think it was a very good show overall. So let's go ahead and start from the very beginning with the buy-in, the pre-show. We had a casino battle royale, kind of similar to the one we got at Double or Nothing earlier this year, but whereas that one was mainly centered around the men, this one was all about the women and determining one half of the competitors who will compete on AEW television on TNT, I believe on its debut edition on October 2nd, to crown the first ever AEW Women's Champion. So we had a battle royal full of a bunch of women talent. I'm not going to go through every single person, just some of the names that I was able to jot down that I knew going in, and some of the ones that caught my eye during the match. Of course, you had Awesome Kong and Brandy Rhodes. Of course, they have a connection. You had Allie, Jazz was in there. Britt Baker, one of the favorites to win the match. Of course, she was in there. Big Swole, Nyla Rose, Ivelisse, who recently, I don't know if she signed with the company or not, but it was announced that she'd be in this match. Sadie Gibbs, Teal Piper, the daughter of Roddy Piper. ODB got a spot in this match, which was very shocking. B. Priestley, who of course continued the feud that started with her and Britt Baker from the previous AEW show. Tenille Dashwood, who recently signed with Impact Wrestling. There was some rumors floating around earlier in the day, and I think this weekend in general, that Impact was trying to work out a deal with AEW to get her in this match. So it was nice to see her. And of course, we had a surprise entrant at the end who drew the Joker card, and it turned out to be Mercedes Martinez, who of course has grown a lot of fame in recent years due to her involvement in the Mae Young Classic in WWE. How they didn't sign her, I have no idea, but it's good to see that she was here. And I don't know if this means she's signed to AEW or not, but if she is, that's incredible for her. The match overall, I gotta be honest with you, was kind of sloppy, and I wasn't really overly a fan of it. And the camera work for the match really wasn't all that good. There were a few big spots and big eliminations that happened, and the camera kind of just barely caught it and all that kind of stuff. And some of the eliminations just kind of happened big names were just kind of getting thrown out randomly, especially like during the entrances of other women coming into the match, and it was kind of all over the place. But in the end, it came down to Nyla Rose, Bea Priestley, and Britt Baker. Britt managed to eliminate Bea. She punched her. She was on the outside on the apron. She kind of punched her and knocked her off to eliminate her. And they took a page out of the 1992 Royal Rumble, where Hogan's arm was over the rope, and Sid Vicious, he pulled him over and basically helped Ric Flair. Or no, I'm sorry, that was the other way around. It was Hulk Hogan who got eliminated, and he pulled Sid Vicious over the top rope to help Ric Flair eliminate him. So in this case, it was Bea who pulled on Britt's arm, and she basically gave an assist to Nyla Rose to eliminate Britt Baker. And Nyla Rose is the winner, and she will get the chance to compete to become the first ever AEW Women's Champion on October 2nd on that debut episode of AEW TV. They need a name for that show. Their first episode of that show on October the 2nd on TNT. So this obviously continues the feud between Britt Baker and Bea Priestley, and makes Nyla Rose look like the big monster that they want her to be. But again, the match itself overall wasn't all that special, but good for Nyla Rose. She gets a big spot in that regard. And then the next match on the buy-in was a tag team match between Private Party, Mark Quinn, and Isaiah Cassidy against Angelico and Jack Evans. So you got these four guys in there, so it was entertaining. Private Party are just an amazing tag team to watch. They are very, very entertaining. And of course, Angelico and Jack Evans are just amazing, stellar athletes to watch. So this was a really fun match. The finish was really great. So Mark Quinn, he hit a reverse Rana. It was kind of sloppy. He kind of messed it up and botched it a little bit, but he still hit the move. A reverse Hurricane Rana on Jack Evans off the top rope, or top turnbuckle. Meanwhile, Isaiah Cassidy, he goes and hits a standing reverse Rana on Jack Evans right in the middle of the ring. And then Mark Quinn gets up, goes to the other side of the ring, hits a reverse, well, not reverse, but just a regular Hurricane Rana on Angelico, say that 5 times fast, off the top rope, and it led right into Angelico going into a cutter from Cassidy to give Private Party the win. After the match, they all shook hands, were showing each other respect, but Angelico and Jack Evans ended up attacking them, laying them out, and establishing themselves as heels, and beat them down. I believe Angelico put Mark Quinn in some kind of heel hook deathlock kind of submission, was messing up his leg, so I guess that'll be an injury they can play up heading into the tag team tournament they'll be doing on TV to determine the first ever tag team champions. So we'll see if that comes into play in the future. And the last thing on the buy-in, they showed a vignette for some guy named Wardlow, who was walking with some woman in the parking lot and ended up just beating up a bunch of guys, just kicked their asses. So that was about that. I have no idea who this guy is, and I guess we'll see. So that leads us to the main show. The show was called by JR, Excalibur, and Golden Boy. So Golden Boy, who made that one, or at least what we thought was a one-time appearance at Fyter Fest and really impressed everyone. He has officially signed with AEW and provided commentary for this show. So no Alex Marvez. He was doing backstage stuff and was kind of interviewing people after matches and all that kind of stuff. And I think they had a post show, and he was hosting that, I believe. So he wasn't on commentary. And of course, Tony Schiavone recently signed with AEW, and he didn't appear, which I didn't figure he would. But I know he'll probably show up eventually and do some work for them. But either way, the main show, the show kicked off with a 6-man tag team match. SCU, SoCal Uncensored, the team of Frankie Kazarian, Christopher Daniels, and Scorpio Sky taking on the Jurassic Express, that being Marco Stunt, Jungle Boy, and Luchasaurus. The match itself was fine, but just observations about certain people. Marco Stunt I've known this for a long time, just like I know a lot of you already know this, but the dude is just unbelievably tiny. It is amazing watching him out there and just seeing how small he is. It's just inhuman. And of course, another thing I'm sure a lot of you knew, but this just kind of cemented it, or further cemented it, I should say, is that Luchasaurus is damn impressive. He was hitting some dives in this match and was just hitting a lot of really big moves on the SCU guys, and he really impressed a lot of people. He impressed me. My first exposure to him was in Lucha Underground, I think the last season of Lucha Underground, and he really impressed me there, and I was very happy to see him sign with AEW, and I know this guy has just money written all over him if they can just tap into whatever talent he has and kind of build on that and help him grow. He could be challenging for the world title one day and could be a big attraction to build around. So very impressive in this match. Of course, those guys were all impressive, but it was not enough for them to get the win. It was SCU that secured the win after Daniels and Kaz hit the best Meltzer ever. I believe it was on Marco Stunt. They hit the move and they got the win. And then after the match, everyone shook hands and rose each other's arms and that kind of stuff, I should say. Showed each other respect. So that was that. Up next was a match that was added at the last minute, literally 10 days ago, to this show in replacement of another match, that being Kenny Omega versus Pac. Now, this match was originally going to be Kenny Omega versus Jon Moxley, but unfortunately, Jon Moxley ended up coming down with a case of MRSA in his elbow. I believe they said it was due to him getting infected over in Japan. I think it happened probably during the G1 climax. So that MRSA came in and he had to get surgery, so he was unable to get cleared for this match. So the match was canceled, and in his place, they slotted Pac. So as much as I was looking forward to Moxley and Omega, and I'm sure that will be a great match to promote on a future episode on TNT later on down the line, but Pac as a replacement was a very good one. And I knew going into this would be a great match, and even at the end, by the end of the show, I still looked at this match as one of the best matches of the entire night. And in some cases, it probably was my favorite match of the entire night. This was a really great match. The commentators were telling the story of Kenny Omega just not being quite the same Kenny Omega that he was in New Japan. He's coming out here, he's having these matches, and he's just not quite as good as he once was in Tokyo. And they were also telling the story that, you know, hey, he had 10 days at least to prepare for Pac, but still in the back of his mind, he was thinking about Jon Moxley. And because of that, he kind of underestimated Pac going into this match. And that was a story they kind of told in the match itself. You know, whereas Omega usually does have the speed and agility advantage over his opponents, Pac is someone who matches him in that regard, if not surpasses him. So that played a role in this match. Pac was able to keep up with him and kind of outdo him. These guys were literally limited in some of the things they could do. Both men attempted dives on each other to the outside, and both men, while executing their dives, kind of had their legs collide with the barricade. The barricade was really, really close to the ring. So when one guy would dive onto the other on the outside, in doing so, their leg would kind of crash into it, and it probably was just good selling on their part, but it did look like they kind of banged their leg into the barricade, and that just didn't look all that comfortable. But it didn't really hurt the match too much. Both men hit some sick German snoopplexes. Jesus Christ, this show was so long. Sick German suplexes on one another. Pac in particular hit a couple of really cool snap Germans on Omega, which I thought were really good. Of course, it's a Kenny Omega match, so expect V triggers. He hit a bunch of them. Some of them got blocked, but some of them connected. There was a botched reverse Hurricane Rana. I believe it was Kenny Omega who tried to hit the move, and it kind of got botched. The crowd didn't really acknowledge it. They just kind of, it was like, oh, well, that's unfortunate. And then they started to chop each other and just started doing hits back and forth. Then eventually Omega got Pac up for the one-winged angel, but Pac managed to reverse it and turn it into his own submission hold, the brutalizer, where he just kind of wraps himself around you from the back and just kind of squeezes on you. It was in midair, or standing, I should say, and then eventually Omega just kind of slumped down and he was out. And Pac got the win. I was stunned. The crowd was stunned. This was not a pro Pac crowd. They liked him. They liked seeing him there, but for the most part, they were booing him because I'm pretty sure that's because of how much they love Kenny Omega. But he was getting boos for most of this match. Even early on, they were giving him 205 chants. So they were really into Kenny Omega, and I felt that Kenny Omega was going to get the win, mainly because I didn't think Pac was in AEW for the long haul. I figured he was kind of like a one-off kind of deal, but Pac got the shock win. This was probably the most shocking finish of the night. Actually, no, there was another finish that was shocking, but not in a good way. This was in a good way. It pleasantly surprised me, and it looks like that Pac is probably in AEW for the long haul, or at least more long term in the future. So that's great. So really great match. Really one of the best matches of the night, and I look forward to seeing what Pac can do in AEW in the future. So many other great talented guys he can get in the ring with, and I look forward to seeing what else he does. Up next was the Cracker Barrel Clash, a triple threat match between Darby Allin, Joey Janela, and Jimmy Havoc. A hardcore match that involved staple guns and thumbtacks and biscuits and literal barrels, because of course you gotta promote Cracker Barrel, which they did. At one point, Darby Allin and Joey Janela double teamed Jimmy Havoc, ended up taping him to a chair, shoved thumbtacks into his mouth, and then taped his mouth shut. That's pleasant. A little bit later, Allin was up on the top. He was about to hit a dive on Janela in the ring, but meanwhile on the outside where Jimmy Havoc was, he was kind of egging him on, Allin that is, to crash into him, and Allin obliged and did the dive to the outside onto him, while, mind you, Havoc is still taped to the chair and mouth taped shut with thumbtacks in it and all that kind of stuff. Like I mentioned, there was a staple gun used. At one point, Havoc staple gunned, or stapled Joey Janela's head, so that was something. There was another point where Joey Janela tried to do a dive to the outside, and either Havoc moved or he just wasn't positioned right. Either way, when Janela landed, he landed splat on the ground. It was pretty brutal. Like I mentioned before, biscuits were involved, literal barrels. Allin had a barrel, and he had the bright idea to do that. You remember at Fyter Fest in that match with Cody where he was going to do that back dive onto Cody on the apron. Cody moved, and he just kind of landed like thud onto the apron. Well, he did the same thing here, except this time he had the barrel behind him, and when he flew back, Havoc moved out of the way, and with the barrel, he crashed onto the barrel, onto the steel steps. So apparently Darby Allin has a death wish. I don't know. So that pretty much took him out of the rest of the match. And then what's his name? Jimmy Havoc ended up hitting a Rainmaker, and in doing so crashed Joey Janela onto the barrel and got the win. I'm gonna be honest with you, I didn't really like this match all that much. I mean, some of the spots were interesting or innovative, but overall I wasn't really a big fan of it, but it was fine. The next match, another match I wasn't really a huge fan of, but it was fine for what it was. It was the Dark Order, Evil Uno and Stu Grayson taking on the Best Friends, Sexy Chucky T, or Chuck Taylor, and Trent. I thought he was Beretta, but I guess he's just going by Trent now, but Trent Beretta. And in this match, the winning team would receive a bye in the tag team tournament to determine the first ever tag team champions for AEW. So the crowd chanted spooky perverts at the Dark Order, but that's about as much attention they gave the Dark Order because they didn't really care about them in this match. They weren't booing them. They weren't really, like I said, other than that, they weren't chanting a whole lot at them. They popped huge for the best friends, especially their hug spot and all that kind of stuff. But otherwise, they weren't really digging this match because they weren't really digging the Dark Order. And I haven't seen anyone really get into the Dark Order ever since they first arrived in AEW. Their act has potential to be good. They have what they call them, the creepers, kind of like their little minion people that they have on the outside, who played a factor in this match leading to the finish. But overall, the gimmick just ain't really resonating with people. So, like I said, the finish. So those creepers, they came in, they got involved. They attacked Chuck Taylor on the outside, and the referee, of course, didn't see it. Meanwhile, back in the ring, they ended up hitting the fatality, their finisher, on Trent Beretta and got the win. So the Dark Order receives a bye in the tag team tournament. After the match, they ended up attacking Chuck Taylor on the outside, and the creepers went to lift up Trent Beretta to carry him away when all of a sudden the lights go out, and when they come back on, we see in the ring, it's Orange Cassidy with the shades on, with his tight jeans, and his hands in his pockets. Now, mind you, he has on shades, and his hands are in his pockets. This is going to be the same case after I tell you what he just did. So, with the Dark Order all on the outside, Orange Cassidy does a tope suicida. I think he just does a dive through the ropes. We had a lot of tope suicidas throughout this entire night. So he did a dive through the ropes, collided and crashed into everyone on the outside, got back in the ring, rolled back in the ring, did a kip up, and stood upright. All this while his hands were still in his pockets and his glasses were still on. Unbelievable. And then we see the best friends get back in the ring, and they both go in and hug Orange Cassidy, and we just get this shot of the two of them looking all happy, hugging Orange Cassidy. Meanwhile, he's still Cool Hand Luke, no expression, just straight-faced, doesn't remove his hands from his pockets at any point. So, that was funny. But, otherwise, yeah, not really a big fan. I hope the Dark Order can grow on me eventually, but for right now, I'm not really feeling them all that much. And then the next match, we had Riho taking on Hikaru Shida. And the winner of this match would go on to face Nyla Rose on October 2nd to determine the first ever AEW Women's Champion. It was a pretty good match. I thought it was alright. Nothing overly special, but it was a pretty good match. Riho is just so adorable. She's only like 22. The crowd loves her. They weren't really reacting much for her in this match, but at past shows we've seen her at, the crowd has loved her. The crowd kind of seemed a little tired for this match. They weren't overly enthusiastic for it, but at certain points they livened up. At some points, Shida hit some pretty power moves, hit some deadlift suplexes on Riho. One in the ring and then another one over the top rope from the apron into the ring. So she showed off some power there. But it was in the end, throughout the entire match, Riho was trying to get roll-ups and schoolboys and all that kind of stuff, cradles, to beat Shida. And finally, it was I think it was a roll-up, it could have been a schoolboy, whatever it was. She got the win, just barely, and she secured her spot. So it's going to be her and Nyla Rose. Riho versus Nyla Rose. And the winner will become the first ever AEW Women's Champion. And we will find out who that will be on October 2nd on TNT. So, looking forward to seeing who comes out on top in that one. Next matchup was probably the one with the most build on the entire show, that being Cody taking on Shawn Spears with Tully Blanchard in his corner. Of course, this dates back all the way to the chair shot heard around the world back at Fyter Fest, when Shawn Spears came in and walloped Cody over the top of his head and busted him wide open with the chair shot. And ever since then, this feud has been really personal, and you knew it was going to blow off in a big way here, and for the most part it did. This felt like a very old school kind of grudge match deal. Cody was only allowed one person in his corner due to the stipulations that Tully Blanchard and Shawn Spears wanted in the contract. So when Cody made his entrance, he came out with his wife, Brandy, DDP, MJF, one of his best friends, and his dog Pharaoh, who didn't want to have anything to do with being out there in front of that crowd, especially when the pyro and fireworks and all that kind of stuff went off for Cody's entrance, and the dog had to come out there right after it all went off, and he was trying his absolute best to get away from that stuff. So he wasn't out there for long. But Cody had to make a choice of who he wanted out there with him, and he chose MJF. So MJF was out there in the corner, which just screamed screw job, fuck over, all that kind of stuff. But, well, I'll go ahead and spoil it. None of that happened. They teased it after the match, but none of it happened. So the match itself, Cody, when he made his entrance and got in the ring, he immediately went after Shawn Spears on the outside before the bell even rang, and they fought in the crowd, all that kind of stuff. He even managed to get a punch in on Tully Blanchard, so it was hot right from the very get-go. And they get back in the ring, the bell rings, and we're off to the races. Of course, Tully Blanchard's out there, so he provides interference left and right. MJF provides unintentional interference, kind of distracting the ref unintentionally to allow Shawn Spears and Tully Blanchard to do dastardly things to Cody Rhodes. At one point, Shawn took off Cody's weight belt and tried to use it on him, but the referee, of course the referee being Earl Hebner, he prevented him from doing that. He got in his face, Spears that is, got in Hebner's face, and Hebner, fought back at him and told him he can't use the weight belt. Meanwhile, this whole time, Tully Blanchard's undoing his own belt and handing it to Shawn Spears from behind, and when the referee had his back turned, Shawn used the belt on Cody to start whipping him. The referee still saw it eventually, but I guess using a belt on someone does not count as using a foreign object, so no DQ. Cody eventually got fired up from the belt shots, started to fight back, even hit the crossroads, but Tully Blanchard was up on the apron to provide a distraction from the referee to prevent him making the count. MJF was on the other side of the ring. He got up on the apron, and eventually both men got in the ring and went at it. MJF threw his scarf at Tully, but then Tully started to choke him, and they just started kind of going after one another. Shawn Spears ended up hitting a bicycle kick on MJF to kick him out of the ring, and with MJF laid out on the outside, Tully Blanchard just started kicking and punching at him out there. And then out of nowhere, from the back, we see Arn Anderson, the enforcer, come out there. He gets in the ring. Shawn Spears is in the ring. He gets in the ring, and he lays out Shawn Spears with a Spinebuster. Now, this ain't as beautiful of a Spinebuster as when he did the run-in at WrestleMania 18 and hit that Spinebuster on The Undertaker. That shit was awesome. I still go back and watch WrestleMania 18 every year and specifically look for that spot because that was really great. But so it wasn't anything as good as that, but it was still a very good looking Spinebuster. So he leaves. Tully Blanchard, I guess he just decided to leave at this point. He looked dumbfounded that Arn Anderson, his former Horseman buddy, would attack his guy. So he goes to the back, and then it comes down to Cody and Shawn Spears. Shawn introduced the chair that started it all, but Cody ended up getting the chair. He threatened to use it, but he threw it down. Shawn went after him, but then Cody ducked it. He started hitting some of Dusty Rhodes' signature moves on him, hit him with the disaster kick, but in doing so, Shawn managed to pick up the chair. So when he hit the disaster kick, the kick kind of had the chair go back in Shawn's face. And Cody hit him with the crossroads and got the win. After the match, MJF had the chair. Cody had his back turned. It looked like he was going to use it on him, but then he threw it down. And then he hugged Cody, and that was the end of it. So Cody beat Shawn Spears. Don't think I would have gone with that finish. I'm not sure I exactly agree with that finish. I felt like with this feud, it probably would have done more to benefit Shawn Spears to get the win over Cody. This was the shocking finish I was talking to you about, the one that was not exactly good. Now, I saw people already jump into, Cody, it might as well just be Triple H, or worse, Jeff Jarrett. Look, until we get to the day where Cody is winning the AEW World Championship and is holding it for like 18 months straight, he is not Jeff Jarrett in the early days of TNA. So let's not jump to that conclusion. This was just one match here where he won. Do I agree with him winning? No, because I didn't think he needed to win. I don't think he should have won. I think between the two of them, Shawn Spears is the one who could have benefited from the win. Plus, with the inclusion of Arn Anderson now, I don't know if this feud is exactly over or not. I mean, it could be. This could have just been a one-off, but that would be kind of lame for it to just kind of start and stop like that. So I don't know where they go from here, but I just think a better way to progress a feud would have been Shawn Spears getting the win. However that was, whether he cheated, whether you pull the trigger on the MJF turn, because you know it's coming. MJF is just a golden heel. He is golden in his role as a heel, yet he's all chummy with Cody Rhodes. You know he's going to turn on him eventually. So, you could have pulled the trigger tonight, or that's something you want to build up. Maybe for Double or Nothing 2020. I don't know. But, I don't know. I think Shawn Spears could have benefited from a big win here, but whatever. Cody won. The next match was, to some, probably the best match of the night. To others, batshit insane. And I kind of fall into that same category too. Some were leaning into both. It was Escalera de la Muerte, a ladder match for the AAA World Tag Team Championships. The champions, the Lucha Bros, Rey Fenix and Pentagon Jr., defending against the Young Bucks, Matt and Nick Jackson. This match was insane. There's really not much else to say about it other than that. This was a crazy match. And that's just putting it mildly. The stuff they got away with doing well, not got away with, but just the stuff they pulled off in this match was just insane. There was a few things early on, like, people going through tables and all that kind of stuff. There were like 2 sets of tables, and like on both sides of the ring, someone speared the other guy off the apron, through the ropes, through tables. There was like 2 of them that happened. All that shit was fine. But stuff didn't get really crazy until a little bit later on, when we see Matt Jackson on the top of the ladder. He's trying to go for some move on Phoenix, but then Pentagon, who's on the apron, he sees this, he climbs up the ladder, he gets Phoenix out of the way, he saves his brother, and he goes right after Matt. And he ends up hitting Matt with now you can call it whatever you want to call it, a Canadian destroyer, a Mexican destroyer, whatever you want to call it. I'll call it Mexican destroyer just because it's Pentagon. So he hits the Mexican destroyer on Pentagon. Pentagon hits the Mexican destroyer on Matt off the top of the ladder, crashing all the way down through a table. And when I tell you they crashed through that table. And I'm sure he didn't go head first, but it damn sure looked like it. That was brutal. That's definitely something I've never seen before. It was very innovative. So I gotta tell you, I really thought that was unique. I thought Matt died. How he was able to still do stuff later on in the match, I have no idea, but kudos to him, I guess. But that was definitely insane. A little bit later, we see Phoenix on top of one ladder, I believe on the outside. He dives off of the ladder onto Pentagon. Meanwhile, on the other side, Nick dove off of a ladder, crashing into Phoenix crashed into Matt Jackson, and Nick Jackson crashed into Pentagon. They both came off ladders and crashed into the respective brother. So that was crazy stuff too. Pentagon ended up pushing a ladder over with Nick on top of it, and Nick came crashing down, went to the outside and went through a table. Unfortunately, when collapsing, he kind of got tangled up in the ropes a little bit, so it was an ugly fall through the table, and it just made it look worse. Pentagon, he was on top of the ladder, he was going for the titles, and then Matt was up there with him. Matt ended up pulling off Pentagon's mask, and that got a huge reaction from the crowd. They even booed. And this is a crowd that does not boo the Young Bucks often, but they booed that because they know what that means. He ended up super kicking Phoenix in midair. Phoenix tried to come off the top turnbuckle, and while still on the ladder, Matt gave him a super kick. But even while protecting his face, Pentagon managed to push the ladder over, and Matt fell over. And then eventually, Pentagon found his mask, put it back on, and then he and his brother Phoenix hit a diving foot stomp package pile driver combo on Matt Jackson on a ladder bridge between the barricade and the ring. They got back in the ring and they climbed the ladder and they got the win. So they retained the AAA Tag Team titles and they beat the Young Bucks, seemingly marking the end to this feud, especially considering what happened immediately after the match. Not even 10 seconds after they won, we see these two guys in masks, what looked like Johnny Utah masks, if for anyone who's seen Point Break. They come in there, they attack the Lucha Bros, they even attack the Young Bucks. They take off the masks and reveal themselves to be Santana and Ortiz, LAX, one of the best tag teams in the world, who just recently wrapped up their stint in Impact Wrestling and have been free agents for a while now, and were rumored to be signing with AEW. And they showed up here. They laid out all the teams, the crowd popped huge for them, and just like that, an already stacked tag team division just became even more stacked. Look at this AEW tag team roster. We have the Young Bucks, we have the Lucha Bros, we now have LAX, and this is in addition to SCU and the Best Friends and Private Party and all these teams. Angelico and Jack Evans. This is a stacked tag team division, and if I would be so bold, I would say this is probably the best tag team division in all of wrestling today. So, great addition, great crazy match, and a great surprise seeing LAX debut immediately afterwards. So, very looking forward to tag team wrestling in AEW. After this match, we got a big announcement. The next time AEW will be appearing on pay-per-view, it'll be AEW Full Gear. It's going to be live on pay-per-view November 9th from Baltimore, Maryland. So, that's cool. Pretty cool name, Full Gear. I dig it. And we'll see what kind of card shapes out for that show. So, cool announcement there. And then finally, we get to the main event. Chris Jericho versus Hangman Adam Page. The match to determine the first ever AEW World Heavyweight Champion. We had Hangman Page riding out on a horse for his entrance, living up to his cowboy moniker. And these two went out there and had a pretty solid main event. I mean, coming after that tag team ladder match, this was going to be very tame in comparison. But they had a pretty good match. It was nothing overly special, but it was very good. The match was even better due to the blood. At one point during the match, Chris Jericho ended up doing a blade job. We even saw the referee hand him the blade to do it, and he got busted open. He didn't really bleed a gusher, but he did bleed pretty heavily, and I think the blood added a lot to the match. It added something that it would have felt like it was missing something had the blood not been there. The match would have been okay, maybe good, but it would have felt like it was missing something, and I think the blood added a lot to this match. So it kind of added to that grizzled old veteran thing Chris Jericho was pulling in this match, like, by hook or by crook, I'm gonna win this thing. I have to win in order to keep up with my own legacy, and of course Hangman Page, the young stallion, wants to prove himself right now, had his wife there, had his parents there, wanted to have this big moment for himself. So the stars aligned for a pretty good main event story, and they told it, and they told it pretty well. Both men hit their moves on one another. Page went for his dead eye, but it got countered into the walls of Jericho, which of course was not enough to finish off the match. He got to the ropes. He ended up hitting a moonsault, Hangman Page did, to the outside, and slightly re-aggravated his knee injury that plagued him earlier in the year. He got in the ring, went for his buckshot lariat. He hit the move earlier, but this time when he went for it, Jericho caught him with a code breaker, which I thought was a really cool counter. Only good for a 2 count though. Then a little bit later, Hangman Page did hit the Deadeye, but that also was only good for a 2 count. And that's a move you don't see a lot of people kick out of. That move's pretty protected for the most part. So seeing Chris Jericho kick out of it, that kind of made it a bigger deal. See, when you kick out a finishing move, sometimes it makes it a bigger deal. Not when you do it every single gosh damn match. Anyway, the finish came. Hangman Page went for the lariat one more time. He hit it, I should say. Then he went for the Deadeye, but Jericho managed to weasel his way out of it. There was a little tussle, and Jericho hit the Judas effect, that back elbow hit, and he got the win. It was a tad bit anticlimactic because that move is not the most exciting, dangerous finish, but hey, it was good enough to finish off Kenny Omega at Double or Nothing, so it was good enough to get the job done here. Chris Jericho wins, and he makes history by becoming the very first ever AEW World Champion. Another huge accomplishment that he can add to his long list of accomplishments that he will continue to boast about to this very day, including the fact that he became the first ever undisputed champion by beating The Rock and Stone Cold Steve Austin on the same night. So like I said, a solid finish to the show. Chris Jericho winning was the correct outcome. I know Jericho's almost 50 years old, but in this match, you had the choice between Chris Jericho and Hangman Page, and I'm a big Hangman Page fan. He's really grown into a great pro wrestler and a great character. He's really over with the crowd, and he has a bright future ahead of him, but I just didn't think that this was the night to pull the trigger on him winning the championship. And honestly, I wouldn't do it in 2 months or even 6 months from now either. I think that's something you might want to build up to a year from now. As for Jericho, yes, he's the WWE guy. He's the guy who's been around forever, but he was the good choice in this case. You know, he's the top heel in the entire company, and it's good to have the other babyfaces chase him, like Hangman Page or even Kenny Omega when he gets back to his winning ways. Jon Moxley when he's healthy again, you know. These guys can chase after him and chase after that championship, and even some other guys who I'm not even thinking of. So I thought it was a solid way to end the show and made an overall really good show. So I was very impressed. This was a day full of wrestling, though. Earlier in the day, we had WWE wrestling, NXT UK takeover. Apparently, there was a really great match between Walter and Tyler Bate for the United Kingdom Championship in the main event. So I should probably check that out. And New Japan had their Royal Quest show in the UK. Apparently there were some streaming issues with it, so I don't know if I'll check that out or not. I really want to see that Okada Minoru Suzuki match, so I'll look into it. But as for All Out, that was the only one I really saw, and I thought it was a really good show. Like I said, not perfect by any means, but is any wrestling show ever perfect? So yeah, I liked it, and next time we'll be talking about AEW, it'll be when they're on TNT, and I'm looking forward to that, October 2nd, so hopefully you're there with me, and let me know what you guys thought about this show. Comment in the comment section below, let me know, and yeah, so till next time, see y'all later.